The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of a modest bedroom. Elena, a devoted Filipino caregiver, stretched and rubbed her tired eyes before glancing at the small photo frame on her nightstand. Inside was a picture of her two children back in the Philippines, their smiles bright despite the faded backdrop of their simple home. She kissed the frame lightly, whispering, "Para sa inyo, this is for you." Her day began like any other, a quiet breakfast of rice and eggs before heading to the grand Whitmore estate in Southern California. The sprawling mansion, with its manicured lawns and marble columns, was a stark contrast to her humble life. Yet Elena squared her shoulders, reminding herself why she was there: to provide for her family back home. Inside the cold, elegant house, Elena's warmth stood out. Mr. Whitmore, the aging patriarch, greeted her with a weak but heartfelt smile. While his wealthy children treated him as a task to be outsourced, Elena saw him as someone who deserved compassion and care. Little did Elena know that her quiet sacrifices and acts of kindness would soon lead to a life-changing event. The Whitmore estate stood in stark contrast to Elena's modest life, its towering marble columns and manicured gardens exuding wealth and formality. As she approached the grand entrance, she squared her shoulders, her resolve firm. Inside, the cold elegance of the home was palpable, every polished surface emphasizing its emptiness. Elena greeted Mr. Whitmore with her usual cheerfulness. He sat by the window in his wheelchair, gazing at the pristine garden. His expression softened as she entered. "Ah, Elena, my sunshine," he said, his voice warm despite his frail body. She chuckled as she helped him to the breakfast table, setting down his carefully prepared meal of scrambled egg whites. "Egg whites again," he grumbled, though the twinkle in his eye betrayed his teasing. Elena laughed, adjusting the napkin on his lap. "You'll thank me when you're dancing at your great-granddaughter's wedding, puh," she replied. The light banter between them filled the room, momentarily breaking the home's usual silence. Later, Elena wheeled him into the sunroom, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The garden stretched out like a painting, perfectly trimmed but devoid of life. Mr. Whitmore dozed in his chair while Elena pulled out her phone, watching a video her children had sent the night before. Their laughter and voices filled her heart, momentarily bridging the miles that separated them. "Mommy misses you," she whispered before tucking the phone away. As the morning wore on, Elena led Mr. Whitmore through his daily exercises, guiding his arms gently and encouraging him with every small movement. "You've still got it, Mr. Whitmore," she said with a grin. "That's only because of you," he replied, his smile genuine despite his labored breath. While Elena cared for him with unwavering dedication, the rest of the family remained absent. Their indifference hung heavily in the air, but Elena's focus never wavered. She poured her heart into every task, unaware that her quiet strength was laying the groundwork for a life-changing moment that would soon unfold. The Whitmore estate was unusually quiet that afternoon, its cold marble floors and pristine hallways amplifying the stillness. Elena moved through the house with her characteristic efficiency, preparing everything Mr. Whitmore might need. From tidying his books to laying out his medications, she ensured that no detail was overlooked. Mr. Whitmore sat in his wheelchair, gazing out at the lifeless garden. "You're always so busy, Elena," he remarked with a faint smile. "Do you ever take time for yourself?" She paused, her hands briefly resting on the edge of the table. "As long as my family is provided for, that's all that matters," she replied. He studied her, his gray eyes heavy with a mixture of admiration and sadness, but said nothing more. The moment was interrupted by the sharp click of expensive shoes on the marble floor. Mark, Mr. Whitmore's son, breezed into the room, his tailored suit impeccable and his phone glued to his ear. "I only have a few minutes," he announced loudly, barely glancing at Elena. "Dad, how are you feeling?" "Like a museum exhibit," Mr. Whitmore replied dryly. Everyone passes by, but no one stops to look. Mark laughed awkwardly, clearly missing the depth of his father's words. "Good to hear you're doing well. I've got to run. Meeting's waiting," he said, turning to leave as quickly as he'd arrived. Elena barely managed a polite nod as he walked past, her presence dismissed as though she were invisible. Later, as Mr. Whitmore rested in his sunroom, Elena scrolled through photos of her children on her phone. She smiled softly at their faces, her heart aching with both pride and longing. The sound of footsteps snapped her out of her thoughts. It was Evelyn, Mr. Whitmore's daughter-in-law, her expression sharp and judgmental. "Elena," Evelyn said curtly, crossing her arms, "make sure the house is spotless before you leave today. We have guests this weekend." Her tone made it clear she wasn't asking. "Of course, ma'am," Elena replied quietly, her hands tightening around her phone. As Evelyn turned and walked away, Mr. Whitmore stirred from his nap. He glanced at Elena, his expression softening. "Don't let them get to you," he said weakly. "They don't see what's right in front of them." Elena smiled faintly, but said nothing. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here for him. Little did she know, the quiet resolve she carried each day was about to set off a chain of events that would change everything. Do you believe people like Elena, who quietly dedicate their lives to others, deserve to be seen and appreciated? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so more people can discover this inspiring story. The days following Mr. Whitmore's brief hospital stay passed in tense silence. Elena resumed her usual duties, caring for him with the same unwavering dedication. While she focused on helping him regain his strength, the hostility from the Whitmore family loomed like a shadow over her. Mark arrived one afternoon, his usual briskness accompanied by a sharp edge in his tone. He barely acknowledged Elena before pulling his father aside. "Dad, we need to talk about your will," he said, his voice low but insistent. "This whole arrangement with her," he added, gesturing toward Elena, "it's concerning." Elena pretended not to hear as she carefully adjusted a vase of flowers by the window, but her heart raced. Mr. Whitmore's reply was firm. "Elena has done more for me than any of you have in years. If anyone deserves something, it's her." His words silenced Mark, but the tension in the air grew heavier. Later that evening, Evelyn cornered Elena in the kitchen. Her expression was cold, her words laced with thinly veiled accusations. "You think you're clever, don't you? Worming your way into his life like this." Elena bit her lip, forcing herself to remain calm. "Ma'am, I'm just here to care for Mr. Whitmore. Nothing more," Evelyn scoffed. "Care? Don't act like you're selfless. We're watching you." As Evelyn left, Mr. Whitmore wheeled himself into the kitchen, his sharp gaze falling on Elena. "Don't let her words bother you," he said softly. "They don't understand what it means to truly care for someone." Elena nodded, though the sting of Evelyn's words lingered. She stayed late that night, tidying up the house and preparing for the next day. As she passed by Mr. Whitmore's room, she heard his faint voice. "Elena, come here." She stepped inside to see him sitting by his bedside, his expression unusually serious. "You deserve more than this," he said firmly. "One day, you'll see your true worth." Elena's throat tightened, but she smiled and replied gently, "All that matters, is that you're getting better. Do you think Mr. Whitmore's family will ever understand Elena's true value?" Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to help us share stories of compassion and courage. The tension within the Whitmore household simmered as the days passed. While Mr. Whitmore's health slowly improved under Elena's attentive care, the family's resentment toward her grew more palpable. Evelyn and Mark exchanged whispered conversations, their glances cold whenever they passed Elena in the halls. One afternoon, Mr. Whitmore summoned the family to a formal meeting in the dining room. Elena hesitated at the door, unsure if she should stay, but Mr. Whitmore motioned for her to join them. "You're part of this family now," he said firmly. The word startled her, but she obeyed, standing quietly at the edge of the room. The family members sat around the large table, their faces a mix of confusion and irritation. Mark was the first to speak, his voice sharp. "What's this about, Dad? Another decision about the estate?" "Yes," Mr. Whitmore replied, his tone steady but tinged with emotion. "I've made changes to my will, and I want you all to hear why." Mark stiffened, his frustration evident. Evelyn crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at Elena. Nathan scrolled on his phone, disinterested, while Claire sat quietly, her gaze flicking between her grandfather and Elena. Mr. Whitmore's voice carried through the room as he explained his decision. "When I was at my lowest, Elena was there for me. She didn't ask for anything in return, but she gave me something priceless, compassion and dignity. None of you can say you've done the same." Mark leaned forward, his frustration boiling over. "Dad, she's just a caregiver. You can't seriously expect us to accept this." Mr. Whitmore's eyes flashed with a rare intensity. "She's more than that. Elena is the reason I'm alive today, and she's shown me what true care looks like. That's why I've chosen to leave her a significant portion of my estate." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Evelyn was the first to break the silence. "She's manipulating you," she said coldly. Elena's chest tightened, but before she could respond, Mr. Whitmore raised a hand. "Enough! Elena has done nothing but give selflessly. This decision is final." Elena's voice trembled as she finally spoke. "I'm grateful for your kindness, but I never wanted to cause any problems. I'm here to help you, not to divide your family." Mr. Whitmore smiled faintly, his voice softening. "You haven't caused problems, Elena. You've reminded us what truly matters. Do you think acts of kindness like Elena's can truly transform hearts? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to inspire others with stories of resilience and compassion. The Whitmore family's tension reached a breaking point in the days following Mr. Whitmore's announcement. Evelyn and Mark grew increasingly vocal, whispering about legal options and contesting the will whenever Elena was within earshot. Despite their animosity, Elena remained steadfast, continuing to care for Mr. Whitmore with the same grace and dedication. One quiet afternoon, Mr. Whitmore called a final meeting. The family gathered in the sunlit dining room, their expressions a mix of frustration and unease. "This is the last time I'll address this," Mr. Whitmore said firmly, his voice steady. "Elena's role in my life goes far beyond caregiving. She's shown me the kind of selflessness and love that I hope to see in my family." Mark leaned forward, anger simmering. "Dad, you're giving her a part of your estate, money that should stay in the family." Mr. Whitmore met his gaze without flinching. "And what has this family given me in return? Elena saved my life when no one else cared enough to show up." Evelyn crossed her arms, her voice cold. This is emotional manipulation. Mr. Whitmore shook his head. No, Evelyn. What's manipulative is pretending to care only when money is involved. Elena has asked for nothing, but she's given everything. Elena, standing quietly near the doorway, finally spoke, her voice steady but full of emotion. I've never wanted to cause problems. I'm only here to help. Mr. Whitmore smiled faintly. And that's exactly why you deserve what I've given you. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the family. Claire glanced at Elena, her expression one of understanding and quiet support. In the days that followed, the family's protest began to soften. Claire became a bridge, speaking with her parents and helping them see Elena's true value. Meanwhile, Elena used the inheritance to bring her children to the United States and start her own caregiving business. Through her work, she extended the same compassion that had changed Mr. Whitmore's life to others in need. One sunny afternoon, Elena stood in the Whitmore garden with Mr. Whitmore, who had grown stronger under her care. Elena, he said softly, his eyes filled with gratitude. You've given me more than I can ever repay. Elena smiled warmly. Your kindness, has given me and my family a future. That's more than enough. Elena's story reminds us all that kindness and selflessness can spark profound change, even in the most unexpected places. What are your thoughts on the power of compassion? Share your insights in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to help spread more stories like Elena's. Together, we can inspire a world built on understanding and care.